one of the things we like about the Pareto analysis, or what we're looking at here, the Pareto curve, that relates closely in concept to supply chain management, is this idea of inputs creating outputs, or causes inputs that create effects outputs. And as it relates to inventory management, it's the inventory itself. So if we have inventory that's $100 million and we have 100 SKUs, what are we really trying to say here? That 80 million of the value is represented by 20 of the SKUs. So if we had some sort of SKU, I should say inventory management problem, accuracy, order fill rates were down, orders were all kinds of wrong, and we didn't know where to start, we'd start with these 20 SKUs. Based on the idea, moving ahead a little bit on ABC classification, to the idea of not only value, but usage of the merchandise. But what the Pareto curve tells us is that 80% of the outcomes, the effects, are generated by 20%. There's that 80-20 rule. The Pareto analysis is also known as the 80-20 rule. So 80% of the outcomes, 80% of the value of our inventory is generated by 20% of the SKUs. So this would work out not exactly to that number, but safe to say that in the ballpark, that in this particular quick and dirty example, 100 million in inventory value, 100 SKUs, that 80 million of it would be found in 20 SKUs. So if we're having a problem, might we start with the first 20, the prioritization, the separation of the trivial many from the significant few? The answer to that is yes. Bearing in mind that ABC analysis, which is based on the Pareto curve, the Pareto principle, we're talking about value of the goods and usage. How much of the goods, how much is an SKU, what's its value, and how often are we rotating it through our inventory system? But this visualization helps to bring to life this idea of the Pareto analysis and the 80-20 rule. Pareto analysis and the 80-20 rule are synonymous terms. And basically, 80% of the outcomes, the outputs, are generated by 20% of the inputs. That's the principle. Let's dig a little deeper into this concept of ABC classification, which again is based on the principles of Pareto analysis, all being part of effective inventory management. So the application of Pareto analysis to inventory management, it's based on this axiom that the vast majority of inventory activity is generated by a smaller, not small, but a smaller number of stock keeping units. Inventory management takes Pareto analysis a step further, and this is important, a step further by classifying items based on a combination of their value and usage. How much is a given SKU worth, and how many times, how many pieces a year, how many SKUs a year are we selling? So it's a combination of the two. Based on this principle that 80% of turnover, as it's called, comes from 20% of the SKUs. And this practice is known as ABC analysis, ABC classification. They're synonymous terms. So perhaps the story comes to life a little bit better if we have a quick look at an example. So let's say we have an inventory management scenario with 16,000 SKUs. It sounds like a lot, but actually in some multinational organizations it's not that much at all. We're also saying that we have $5 million in inventory value. So from the 80-20 perspective, from the Pareto analysis perspective, 80% of the value, the outputs right here, is going to come from $4 million, it's going to add up to $4 million. Coming from, which is the input side of things, 3,200 SKUs. Conversely, the remaining 20% in the total value, which needless to say is $1 million, is going to come from 12,800 SKUs. So for the sake of conversation, let's say that this is our total universe that we're operating here, and we have an issue with our inventory. Accuracy, order fill rates aren't complete, orders are wrong. If we have some series of problems with our inventory, and we need to really prioritize, to really focus, at least from a beginning perspective, and allocate resources in a prudent way, it's reasonable to say that we'll start with the 3,200 SKUs. That's still a fairly big number, but start with the 3,200 SKUs that represent 80% of the turnover. Chances are we're going to find much of our challenges, or at least characteristics of our challenges, within those 3,200 SKUs. Now, as a quick observation down here, if 3,200 SKUs, 20%, is still too big to manage, well, 5% of the SKUs is 55% of the total value. Or, kind of paring things down to 800 SKUs that still represent over half of the total value. But the principle here of 80-20 is mathematically illustrated at this point. We're separating the trivial many from the significant few. Let's continue on with this conversation. To reiterate, in our first bullet point here, we're saying that ABC analysis is based on the value and the usage of the SKUs in question. That's referred to as the annual turnover. That's an important term that we want to be able to use in any facet of inventory management. So we want to be able to focus on the value of a given item, a given SKU, as well as its usage. How many times a year, how many units a year are we selling of that particular item? So that annual turnover, which is really what we're focusing in on here, is found by multiplying an item's unit cost by its annual usage. Not its sales price. This is an important accounting distinction to be made here. Not its selling price, but its unit cost within our organization, which is oftentimes found in cost of goods sold on an income statement. Now, to provide more granularity to our analysis, and this is where the ABC terminology comes in, items are classified as either A, B, or C. A being the highest combination of value and usage, B being in the middle, and C being the lowest turnover in terms of value and stock usage. Now, under that ABC classification, what is normally being said here is that for A items, 10% of our total items, our total SKUs, are going to represent 65% of the turnover. And remember what we said turnover meant. Value times stock usage. For B items, 20% of our total items, our total SKUs, are going to represent somewhere around 25% of turnover. And those C items, you can see, fairly large amount, 70%, but only representing 10% of the turnover. So this is where the prioritization component comes in. And just to reiterate, we've said this a couple of times, annual turnover is those annual usage of the given item, of the given SKU, times its unit cost. Not its sales price to our customers, but its unit cost to us. Let's look at this piece even a little bit more closely.